Summer, of course, is long, hot, humid days in the parks. So how do you manage to stay cool on a really hot day? Summers at the theme parks would mean that it was just really hot, humid, sticky, and you would have to find ways to survive. Of course, you should know that on a really hot day you drink lots of water, and we did. At Disney World, we carried around bottles, and I would drink between 8 and a dozen bottles of water a day during the summer. It was that hot. But there's a lot more to staying cool and being able to survive than just drinking water. At Busch Gardens, when we were driving in our Rhino Rally trucks, we would kind of sit down a little bit lower so the windows didn't really quite catch us very much. They were about head height or so. There was a windshield. There were a couple little fans in them, but the fans did not work very well. And in some of the Land Rovers, they didn't work at all. Down in that driver's compartment, it could get exceedingly hot. We had one person bring in a thermometer one time and measure temperatures over 120 degrees. Well, one of the things that we did to help keep us alert was we were only allowed 5 trips around. After our 5th trip, we had to get out of the truck. Usually it meant a trip over to the break room to cool off. Sometimes it meant hopping out onto the loading platform. But we did something to help get us out of that heat and keep us refreshed. But we also had to find little tricks and tips to be able to try and stay cool down in the truck. You may have seen those tubes that absorb water and then you can freeze them and keep cold. We would wear those underneath our shirts. It wasn't unusual for us to take cold packs and ice packs and throw them underneath our seat and sit on those. And so we would try to come up with anything we could to try to keep us cool there, but that didn't look obvious to the guests. At Disney, we learned all sorts of little tricks if we were outside in the heat. If I was on Main Street or Sunset Boulevard and at Hollywood Studios, we would look for the shops that had the open doors because you knew that the air conditioning was going to be blowing so hard, it would actually blow out the door and onto the street. And you could stand in front of that jet of cold air and cool off that way. You would find patches of shade, so as the sun would move, the shadows on the street would move across the street, and so would you. As it got shadier over here, you'd stay over there. As it got shadier over there, you'd stay over there. And you just follow the shadows and work with them. You'd look for other opportunities to be able to run inside and help somebody out inside if they needed it real quick so you get the dose of air conditioning. We would also find ways to sneak ice packs in. We'd freeze our bottles because by the time we'd been out on the street for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they were completely melted. So you get ice water that way. You would look for different photo locations even that were in the shade. So that way you could stand in the shade as you were taking their picture to get something a little bit unique for them, but also to get you a few moments of shade as well. But for most of it, it was just surviving the heat until you could get a break. Some of the parks at our bases, they would actually keep ice pops frozen for us. And we'd go in, grab one of those and cool off real quick. Or we'd go to the break room and I would buy an ice cream bar. It's amazing what a difference an ice cream bar or an ice pop can make when you're overheated, and just getting that cold temperature will cool you off and refresh you in a hurry. At Silver Dollar City though, that's where I think I got the most creative with trying to find ways to stay cool. Because in the summer, especially in August, it can get 100 degrees or more with the humidity. It would be scorching and it could just drain you out. We would do things like with our conductor's hat, we would put ice packs underneath the hat so it would evaporate and dry and cool you off that way. We would roll up our sleeves, even though technically we were supposed to have them down. We would roll them up, put garters on, so that way it could help hold the sleeves up and keep us a little bit cooler. We didn't have very long breaks on the train, but we would get off the train, pop into the break room for a couple minutes of air conditioning, go out, work the station a little bit, pop back into the break room for a couple minutes of air conditioning. We kept the ice pops there because those were kind of a lifesaver. Silver Dollar City also did a couple interesting things. They would actually put sprinklers out for the guests on really hot days to let the kids jump in the water and splash around a little bit. We'd have one that was usually stationed right outside the train station. So I'd walk over, fill up my conductor's hat, dump it on my head. The other thing I would do, we had another ride right down the hill below us called the River Blast. And essentially it was a giant squirt gun battle on boats. Well, if we'd have a little bit of time in between trains, say 10-15 minutes, I would actually make sure the station was all taken care of and everybody was happy. And then I would run down the hill real quick, run over to the River Blast and stand in front of the people on the boat going, "Shoot me!" And in about 30 seconds to a minute, I could get totally drenched and then run back up the hill and finish taking care of the train station. It was a neat little trick. People love talking about shooting the conductor on the train, but it was a great way to cool off. Again, the biggest thing, drink lots of water. As you go out into the theme parks this summer, be sure to stay cool, look for the shade, look for the air conditioning, drink water, be careful, because one of the things we didn't like was when people would overheat. Yeah, I had a couple times at each one of the parks where we would have people who hadn't had water. They would overheat, they would get heat exhaustion, and next thing you know, they're passed out because they hadn't been drinking water and staying cool. Don't let that be you. It's no fun having to call first aid and pour water on people and hold ice on them and whatever else we could do until first aid got there to cool them off. Drink your water, stay cool, have a great summer. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Enjoy your summer out at the parks. Be careful. Be sure to like and share. Thanks so much.